Hi guys, this is Mike. In this Cinema 4D tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a sci-fi space bridge using the plane effector. A lot of times in movies you'll see a spacecraft dock with a space station and there'll be a tunnel in between. I'm going to be making something similar, so let's get started. In this tutorial, I modeled everything first, and I'm going to be just focusing on making the bridge. If you want to use this file, I have a link in the description. So the way that I first did this is I made like a little bridge that came across using cubes and a MoGraph using the cloners. So make a cube, and I'm going to make this about maybe 10 by 10 by 10. And I'm going to put this in a cloner. So go to cloner, throw that underneath the cloner, and we're going to use a grid. So choose grid array and make sure you click render instances. That'll help with any slowdowns with your viewport. And I'm only going to be doing clones in the X and the Z. So I'll go to 1 for the X, for the Y. And then I'll add in a bunch into the X. And we're going to need more space, so let's pull this out. And I want enough so it gets tucked in between each of these little tubes that I made. And let's make the Z a little bit shorter. And we'll increase the clones and make this into a little bit of a bridge. Okay, now I just want to zoom in. You can see there's some overlap. So I'm just kind of, you'll have to adjust, the width and the height and just kind of getting it dialed in. Having an overlap isn't a big deal, but just trying to get it pretty close. And you can also use the option modifier key when adjusting your size. It'll give you smaller increments, so you can do that as well to get it closer. And I'm just going to do a render region and just kind of seeing how this looks. You can see that there's a bit of a gap. It doesn't necessarily need to be completely tightened in. Let me give that. So yeah, I'm just kind of just making sure. Okay, that looks fine. Making sure that that's nice and close. So this is overlapping, so I'm just going to tighten this up. Oops, excuse me. And just kind of dial that in. I want to make sure that it's in between the tubes and it goes all the way in. So let's bring this all the way in there. Okay, so a little bit of back and forth here. And like I said, I'm not trying to get it exactly perfect for this demonstration. I just want to get it pretty close. Okay, so now that I have the cloner, I have the cubes in the cloner, I'm going to select the cloner and then go to MoGraph Effector, and we're going to go to the plane effector. Now right away you see a jump in the in our cubes. So click on plane, and then we're going to go to fall off, infinite box, and then we're going to make the box a little bit longer, and we'll make this a little bit bigger. And go back to the parameter tab. For position, we're gonna go, we're just gonna start typing in some numbers and seeing how this is affected. Now, I don't want it affected in the Z, so this can be at 0. And, you know, if I move the plane, you can see how it's affecting it. And you can see how this yellow box in between the red box is where it's being affected. When it's past the yellow, it's not affected. And then once it's in the red box, it's 100% affected. So we can adjust how we want that transition, how big and small that area is between those two boxes. Now we can also choose the scale. In this case, I'm going to make it negative and tab in between each of these values, and we'll just put in -1 for each one. And if I zoom out, I can use these handles to see how that's affected. Now, how you want this transition to be is subjective. I kind of like it when it's coming where it looks like it's coming up from the bottom. So I'm going to adjust that. I also want to adjust rotation just because it gives it a little bit of variation. I think when it's too uniform, it doesn't look as great. But again, that's sort of a judgment call. So we have our rotation, our scale, and our position. So now it's really just kind of dialing in the position of how you want this and adjusting the fall off. So if I can go to fall off, I can go to, you can see this fall off slider, and we can adjust that and how quickly we have our transition. And I can go back to the parameter and then just start making adjustments to our, you know, where it's coming, excuse me, where it's coming from. And, you know, so I kind of like it when it's coming from the bottom, but again, that's sort of like, you know, how you would like to make it. So now that we have our plane, we have this little walkway that's coming through. I imagine having this tunnel would be, you know, keeping it from the elements, keeping anything, the air kind of pulling things out of it. So if you have that completely sealed walkway tunnel, we can use sort of just a tube that goes through in between each of this, the spacecraft and the space station. So we can do that by just making a cylinder, and we're going to take off caps because we're not going to use that, and we're going to make it in the right orientation. So that's going to be in the positive X, and we're just going to make that a little bit taller in the height. And this could be something about 425, I think is fine. And we just want to make sure that that is connected in between both the space station and the spacecraft. And we're going to give it some height segments, and 36 seems to be okay. And now that we have that, what we're going to do is we're going to make a copy. So Command click and drag, and we're just going to hide this for now, our original one. And for the one we duplicated, we're just going to make that editable. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the live selection, polygon mode. And I'm just going to zoom in and just select one of the polygons. UI on your keyboard is going to reverse the selection. So the selection that we had is going to be deselected and everything else is going to be selected. We're going to delete. And I want to go to point mode. We can see we have all these points left over. I'm just going to option, optimize, and I'll get rid of all those points. So now that we have this, I want to make sure that the access center is in the center of our polygon. Right now it's still in the center of where that tube was. So if you select your polygon, I'm just going to name this polygon, just so I'm a little bit organized here. And then I'm going to go to Mesh, Access Center, and I believe it's Center Parent, no, I'm sorry, Center Access 2. And now we'll center our access center right to our polygon. Now what I want to do is I want to go and get another cloner. So MoGraph cloner, and drag that into our child of our cloner. And we're going to use object mode, and we're going to take our cylinder and we're going to put that right into the object field, the original cylinder that we made. Now you can see that we made all of these polygons, and it's being distributed throughout our cylinder. Let's make sure we have render instances clicked, and then we can choose where this distribution is by going to distribution, and then right now it's default to vertex. We want to go to polygon center. Now you can see how we have a bit of an issue here. It's not exactly on our cylinder. In fact, it's not even in the right direction. So what we can do is we can go to cloner, and we can uncheck fix cloner. And that gives us the ability to rotate our polygon into the right position, so it's actually wrapping around our original cylinder. So let's zero out these coordinates here. First off, and then what we want to do is we want to adjust these degrees in order to get the polygons going in the right direction. So right away you kind of just adjust and see where you want it to be. Now obviously I want to change the direction so it's these aren't exactly squares, there's little rectangles. So I want to change the rectangles to exactly 90 degrees. And let's see here, if I go to 0 and 0, we're still not correct. So let's adjust the heading, and that seems like where we need to be. So let's go to 25 degrees, negative 25, and that snaps everything exactly to where we want it to look as a cylinder. So now that we have that, what we can do is make another plane effector. So go to MoGraph, Effector, Plane, select Plane, and we'll do something very similar to what we did with our little walkway. We're going to go to the shape and we'll go to box. We're going to adjust the size in the X and make everything a little bit larger. We're going to go to the effector and we're going to adjust, the parameter, and we're going to adjust the same thing, rotation, scale, position. And for our position, we're just going to type in some values and see how that is affected. We're going to make this -1, similar to what we did with our walkway. And rotation, again, could be any rotation that you want it to be. I'm just going to choose 45 degrees. And I completely forgot we can just go to uniform scale, and I'll just go to -1. And now let's move this how we want it to work. So you can see how we have this and how it's being affected. I really like how this looks. I like the style of being able to bring in these polygons into our tube. Now, one thing I do notice is that I think the platform or the bridge that we have here is a little too high. Maybe it should be a little lower. So that's something that we can adjust as well. But I like how this kind of just pulls right in. So I feel like it needs to be a little bit wider in the fall off. So wider, what I mean is lengthwise for the in the X. Because what I want this to do is just pull in just like this and just animate that way. Okay. So now that we have that, I also imagine having some sort of design that wraps around around the cylinder, kind of giving it a little bit more structure. Now I'm going to do that by using a spline, and I'm going to use the Helix. And it's in the wrong direction, so we're going to go to, I believe it's the ZY orientation. And I want to bring the radius down. So I'm going to bring the radius to, say, I think 50. And 50 is what I did before. And we're going to increase the height. Next, what I want to do is I want to give thickness to this line. So the way I do that is go to splines again, and we're going to choose circle. And we're going to choose a much smaller size. Let's try 5 for now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put that into a sweep object. So select your helix and your circle and drag it underneath the sweep. I think that might be a little bit too thick, so I'm going to go to the circle and adjust the radius. Get that down to maybe 3 or 4. Let's try 4. And what I want to do now is I want to command, click, and drag and make a duplicate of our sweep. And I'm going to, on our keyboard, I'm just going to rotate around 180 degrees. Holding down Shift, you can move in 10-degree increments, and we'll get to 180. So now we have our little structure, giving it a little bit of a framework to our tube. And maybe this carries electricals or hydraulic lines. I'm making stuff up at this point now. And that, I just think it gives it a little bit more of a design. And so the way we're going to animate that is using the end growth by going from 0 to 100%. And we'll just make keyframes for these two objects. So let's animate what I'm going to do is, now I want to show you something here before I animate. I put in all of these buildings and the spacecraft. I really should call this space station, but these two things I put in its own layer, and you can see that by it has a different color. And what you can do is you can go to layers and turn off the visibility of these objects. And this is all in the Cinema 4D file. You can download that. Now you can turn the visibility off, and that gives you some room in which to animate where you're not kind of working around these objects. And what I like about this is also you can also clean up your objects panel by just clicking on this this option, and that will hide all of these things that you have already made. So it's just a way to clean up and organize your work environment. And you can do that. You can make as many layers as you want. You can say, for instance, this sky object, I can just go to add to new layer, and that gives it a different color. You can change the color of this one if you want. Just a way to label everything, and then you can lock it down so you don't accidentally click on it and move it. And turn off the visibility of it, and like I said before, you can hide it in your objects panel. So next, let's animate. You go to attributes, and I'm gonna animate the little pathway, the little walkway that we have first. And I was thinking that maybe this needs to be dropped down a bit. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong wrong cloner object. So I can just drop this down a bit, and you can see, let me zoom in a little bit, that it's intersecting with our tube. I don't want that. So let's bring this up a little bit more. And I also noticed that our tubes are intersecting with our cylinder. So let's make those a little bit larger as well. We can do that by going to the radius, and let's open that up a little bit. And we'll go to the end radius. And like maybe it was, I think it was 50, so let's try 60 on both ends. Okay, so let's try 55. And just kind of adjusting this just a little bit. I just don't really want it connected or intersecting our cylinder. Okay. Now I'm going to hide our sweep and our cylinder, and I just want to focus in on just this pathway. So we have our cube, and if you want, we can actually organize this. So I'm going to select everything in our pathway. Option G. Call this pathway or walkway. Let's try walkway. And this will be our tube. And I'll just name this structure. Just keep things a little bit organized. So how I'll animate this is I'll select the plane. And I just want to zoom out so I can see our directional tool. And I'm just going to bring this all the way in until it's completely disappears. I'm going to go to the first frame. And I'm going to go to coordinates. And since we'll be moving in the X, I will command click on this button here. And I'll give us a keyframe. I'm going to go all the way to the end of our timeline and adjust our X coordinate. Command click, so we'll have our animation here. Next, I'll go to the tube and I'll do the same thing. Let me go to the plane effector. I'm going to bring this all the way to the end until everything has disappeared. Coordinates, command click, pull this all the way to the end. Adjust the plane in the X. Command click. Now we have that animation. We'll go to our little tubes or little pipes, and I'm going to, let's unhide them. Select the first sweep that we have, and we're going to go to end growth. We're in the first keyframe. I'm going to go to 0. Command click. We'll go to the end of our timeline. 100%. Command click. Now, what you can also do is pull these out a little bit and select all these keyframes, copy. We'll go to our next sweep, go all the way to the beginning. We'll paste, and then we'll have our keyframes in just like we did for our first sweep. And you can see that everything animating if we scrub through our timeline. Now, I love how this is all working. It's just all happening together at the same time. It's just kind of like a big mess of animation. So what I'm going to do is offset these animations a bit. So if I go to the walkway, I want that to start first. So I'm going to go to the plane, and I want to make sure that that's starting first in the timeline. But let's back it off, and our end keyframe, we'll go to, say, maybe not quite the middle, but somewhere around here. We'll see how that looks. You can see how that animates through. Maybe it completes the leave-in a little bit sooner. We might have to adjust that. And then we'll go to our tube. We'll go to the plane effector. We're going to have that start much later. Let's scrub through, see how that looks. And then we'll go to our tubes. So we'll go to the first sweep, and we'll have that start near the end and complete at the end of the timeline. So that's about 40. Go to the next sweep, pull this up to 40, and we'll see how that looks. See, I like how that comes out. Now, let's take a look at everything together. So I'm going to unhide our objects, and let's kind of play that through. And there we go. Now for the, just to, one last thing, let's put in some materials. So I'm going to double click, add a new material, and I will make the first, I'll make the tube first, the tube material first. So I'm going to select color, and we'll give it, this is subjective again, you know, whatever colors you like. You can go orange, you can use sort of a reddish, pinkish color here. We'll go to reflection. We'll give that a little bit of a reflection here. Back off the brightness a little bit. We'll go to transparency. We'll also give that a color, something similar. And for refraction, we'll go 1.3. And let's apply that, see how that looks. We'll apply that to the cloner of our tube. And let's scrub forward, see how that looks. And I'll give a little render region. And let me zoom in. See how that looks. I think that looks all right. Oh, I just realized I have the cylinder is poking through because of our original object. I didn't hit the render stoplight. So I'm just going to click on that, hide that, render region, and pull that through. See how that looks. Looks like it could add a little bit more reflection in there. But other than that, I think it looks all right. And next for the tubes, I was thinking this could be a little bit more of a metal color. So I'm going to choose a dark gray with a reflection, and we'll jack that one up to maybe 50 or so, around 50%. And we'll put that onto our sweeps. Oh. Let me try render region. See how that turns out. So this is a little bit of a quicker tutorial. I wanted to go more, focus more on the, I wanted to focus a little bit more on the MoGraph side of things as opposed to the modeling. And, you know, the modeling is very simple. I just wanted to get that done. It wasn't anything, it's obviously not anything special, but I wanted to just kind of show some of the things that you can do with the plane effector and kind of quickly come up with some very interesting animations to something that is, you know, kind of mundane, such as a bridge that connects two objects. You know, obviously I like sci-fi, I like, you know, space movies and stuff like this. So these are the kind of things that I think about, but it can be applied to really any of your projects. So I hope this was somewhat useful. And again, you can download the Cinema 4D files. I'm going to put a link in the description. And then you can kind of take a look at a lot of these other objects. You can kind of play around with this scene. And start utilizing some of these techniques in your own projects. All right, thanks for watching.